everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. I am so happy you are here at this very busy time of year to hear a very important program to help us at this very busy time of year. So excited about welcoming back Cathy Adams to talk about her new and very, very important book, Zen Parenting, How to Take Care of Ourselves and Others in These Challenging Times. Please do share the resource of the Glenbard Parent Series. We always welcome everyone. If this is your first time here, we welcome you. And if you've been here 1,000 times over the 27 years, that's great too. Please do share it again with family members, neighbors, a friend who lives across the country. Now that we're virtual, it really is so easy to share the resource. And do like us on Facebook, and we welcome others to know that we are here to help families of children of all ages, and we honor your trust with great programming. We thank the sponsors who make this all possible. The Glenbard Parent Series brochure, which you can find online, lists our over 50 programs a year and all of the sponsors, and you saw the slide just a minute ago of those that make it possible. Briefly, before we begin this important conversation, I would like to tell you about some of the upcoming events that we have scheduled. Next week, and even this week, we will be welcoming back Dr. Gouldy Muhammad. She has a very important program called Cultivating Genius and Joy that will be this Thursday at 7 p.m. Very, very inspirational. So as particularly for marginalized students, this is a very important program and their families. Then next week, Tuesday at 7 p.m., we will be continuing a conversation we had last week on what teens need to know about substance misuse. There'll be a presentation from Your Choice Prevention. They'll be taking you inside a teen's room. What do you need to be aware of, and some proactive parenting tips. We'll also welcome Dean Jeske. Dean Jeske is a parent of a graduate of Glenbard South. He will tell you the story of his young man, his child away at school who ordered a fentanyl pill online and died. And so that's an important story. I hope you'll come back next week for that. Coming up in the new year, this is going ahead, but I want to make mention of it. I know Cathy joins me in recognizing the genius of Andrew Solomon. It's just a pleasure to hear him. If you know of someone who doesn't understand depression, this will change everything. As he discusses his own depression most eloquently, that's a special event on the 18th. There are a couple others that month, but we don't want to spend too much time. There is a program about alternative paths or varied paths to 21st century careers. And then also Carla Naumburg will be talking about her book, You Are Not a Shitty Parent. So I do hope you'll come back and listen in for that. So lots of good things going on and lots of good things starting right now. So I am now going to turn it over to Stacy, who is our assistant principal at Glenbard West High School of Operations, and she has the honor of introducing Cathy. So Stacy, take it away.
Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here today. It's an honor to introduce Miss Cathy Adams. Cathy's a self-awareness expert focused on parenting and the personal empowerment of families, especially women and young girls. She's a licensed clinical social worker, certified parent coach, certified elementary school teacher, certified yoga teacher, and she teaches in the sociology department at Dominican University and Elmhurst College. She's the author of The Self-Aware Parent, The Self-Aware Parent 2, and Living What You Want Your Kids to Learn, The Power of Self-Parenting, which won a Nautilus Award, National Indie Excellence Award, and an International Book Award. For 6 years, she and her husband, Todd, have hosted Zen Parenting Radio, a top 10 kids and family podcast on iTunes, and they are the creators of the Zen Parenting Conference held in Chicago. Cathy is a sought-after parenting and family empowerment speaker. She created and facilitated a self-awareness program for pre-adolescent girls called Be You. And she was a child and family therapist and clinical educator at Lurie's Children's Hospital, Chicago. Cathy is a blogger for the Huffington Post and former columnist for Chicago Parent Magazine. She's a frequent guest on WGN Radio, and her parent coaching has been the focus of a CBS News report, as well as a Fox News special report. She's been featured several times in important media, including Newsweek magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and the Chicago Tribune. We are delighted to welcome her back to the Glenbard Parent Series today.
Thank you. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. I appreciate it very much. And I'm very happy to be here today, or to be back after all of these years of COVID. So thank you for having me. The way I want to do today is to just kind of speak freely about what's going on right now in the world, why I wrote the book that I wrote, things that have happened since I wrote it, and also make sure that this is somewhat of a conversational presentation, if possible. If people are listening and they can, type a message or ask a question, I would love to be able to answer it, or to at least go in that direction. So I would like, if you are here and you've taken this time out, this hour, because there's something specific you want to ask me about, I really encourage you to do so. But if you're just here to listen, then I will share as much as I can about my experiences. I am very focused on parenting, and that has always been my, being a family therapist was my beginning, and working with kids, working with couples. But I also have, over the course of my career, worked with elementary school students. I have my own children. I have 3 daughters. I am a college professor, so I work with college students every Tuesday and Thursday, and I have for 12 years. And then I work with a lot of even my children's friends and other teenagers and clients that I've had over time. So why I tell you all that is because the things that I'm sharing about parenting are really not that different than what I'm sharing with young kids and with teens and with college students. I find that parenting to be the time when we're most aware or willing to possibly look at our thinking and shift the way we see things. It's an opening, especially when we find that we're struggling in some way, to do something different, if that's what we need to do. Sometimes it's just to look at something different. It's more about our being rather than our doing. So if you are someone who is listening to this now or later, who is a high school student, or is not a parent, or somebody who is maybe not in the parenting world, but wondering what this is about, this is completely applicable to you as well. The things that Todd and I talk about on Zen Parenting Radio, which is our podcast we've been doing for about 12 years, it's all about self-awareness, and it's all about learning more about who you are and what you can do. And it is applicable to all ages, they're universal principles. Let's just say it that way. Everything we discuss is universal principles. But again, I feel that the people who are most ready and willing to hear what we have to say tend to be parents. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to start with a client that I was talking with yesterday, actually someone in our virtual community called Team Zen. And I'm going to speak about a situation that she ran into that was very generically, that is very typical in today's world of being a parent. And that is that she was feeling really good about something that she had done. She had been really challenged to talk to her son about issues when it came to his girlfriend and how they were going to manage certain things and how they were going to have certain discussions and decisions that needed to be made. And she was able to have a really, what we would call in parenting world, a win, where she felt like he completely understood what she was talking about and they had reached a decision together. And then the next morning she woke up and found out that he had had a friend over and they had smoked weed. And she felt like, oh, I'm starting all over again. I'd had this win and now I have this other challenge. And I feel like there's nothing that I'm failing at parenting. And the thing that I always have to remind everybody about, including her in that moment, is being a parent, or being a human being for that matter, is not about everything going right all the time. It's actually, that's completely impossible. The uncertainty that we have in life, which we have throughout life, sometimes where you don't recognize it, but something like COVID basically woke us up to it, that's for sure, is constant. things are always changing. And I'll say this, Zen Parenting, my book, the reason we use the word Zen in Zen Parenting Radio, and the reason that I called my book Zen Parenting, is because Zen, the best definition, I got this from Jane Hirschfield, but I use it all the time, is that everything changes, everything's connected, pay attention. That's really all it means. It doesn't have to be something esoteric or challenging. That's just what it means. So why that's important is that there isn't a time as parents where we get to a place where everything's fine, everything's good, we feel good about what we're doing, and our kids are everything's great. Especially anybody who has more than one child, you know that it's Todd and I, my husband and I always call it whack-a-mole, where one thing's going on with one child and then we think we get it figured out and then we feel calm and then something's going on with the other. Like, things are always changing and they're always unpredictable. And I think instead of fighting that idea, we join that idea. We understand that idea to be the way of life. And our goal as parents and as human beings is to find meaning in that process, rather than going down the route of being self-shaming, feeling like we're failing, feeling like everybody else is doing it better than we are, that we somehow missed some chip in parenthood, and that we don't have any ability to do this very important job. The truth is, when we are raising human beings, things are always going to be changing. There's going to be good moments and challenging moments throughout our children's life cycle and throughout our own life cycle. So just that understanding alone can be a reframe about what our expectation is when it comes to our kids. What I know from my college students and from my own teenagers and just the teenagers I work with is the part that there's so many things that can be challenging for these kids, but the feeling of being judged and the feeling that their parents feel that they are doing it wrong, or if they could the teenagers, I mean, if they could just get their act together, I'm putting that in air quotes, in whatever way their parents feel they should, that then their parents would be happy, everyone would be happy. And the kids often feel like they're very unseen, very unknown, and that their parents are just trying to create an image of a family rather than an understanding of the people in the family. We tend to do a lot of what I would call, like hiding of our challenges. We want to pretend certain things aren't happening, or we're avoiding of talking about certain things because we're afraid of what it will bring up. And what I know for sure from kids, teenagers, young kids as well, is that they need to know that it's okay that they have challenges. They need to know that it's okay to talk about what they're experiencing. They need to know that the people who love them can handle it. They need to know that they are still a valuable human being if they messed up. I just heard, some of the introduction to some of these books that these other authors and speakers that are coming to, Glenbard, and this understanding of, Jessica Leahy's book about the gift of failure, that failure is not only normal and natural, it's how we learn. It's how we experience things. When I talk to parents and they're so frustrated, or how could my kid have made this mistake, or how dare they not understand this when I've talked to them about this already. That's how human beings learn. We can give our kids information and they can listen. But the truth is, sometimes we have to run something through our own system, have our own experiences for it to make sense, for it to stick, for us to embody what it means to have an experience and then to learn from it. So that's just kind of my opening, a long opening, but I wanted to at least kind of set that stage for Zen parenting is really the practice of parents getting to know themselves and understanding who they are, so they can then create the space to allow their kids to be who they are. And in this time of, and I'm sure everybody's heard this, it's a lot, we have our teens, everybody, but I'll focus on our teens and our kids. There is a heightened anxiety. There is a high level of depression. There is a great discomfort with the unpredictability of life because they got hit really hard, really early with a lot of unpredictability. It could be in their own home, but just the bigger picture of, the last however many years that we've been experiencing so much change through COVID, through, shifts in government, through, change in the schools, through infighting, through divisiveness. They've gone through a lot. So our kids, even prior to the pandemic, were struggling with things like anxiety and depression. And now they now know that unpredictability, and they're often bracing for what comes next. So our job is to be honest about our own feelings when it comes to these things and talk about tools and resiliency and ways that we can get through challenges. Because as I said at the beginning, challenges are inevitable. It's not about avoiding, it's about how we manage. Okay. So I'll start by talking about what parenting really is, reestablishing what parenting is, or maybe at least giving us some things to think about that we haven't, maybe a way to describe parenting that you haven't heard before. Is parenting really is an ability to unlearn things and then to relearn things. So the unlearning process is about letting go of maybe misconceptions that we had about what it means to be a parent, maybe letting go of some of our history, some things that we learned early on that isn't applicable to this day and time. One example I can give is so many parents say things to their kids like, "You're on your phone all day. When I was your age, I was, riding my bike around the neighborhood and I didn't come home until the street lights came on. And, my parents didn't know where I was all day, but I was just active all day." And that comparison for this generation makes no sense because they have never had a life where they went out in the morning and didn't come back until 9 p.m. That was a Gen X perspective, and not everybody in Gen X had it. It was just more common. And they don't understand that as a comparison, and there's a lot of guilt and shame built into it saying, I did childhood better than you, when really the structure that our children are under right now, as far as being in this generation, is that isn't applicable. A lot of children have to be driven to their school because of, where it is or where it's located. We don't allow our kids to be gone without letting us know for, every hour where they are because of our own anxiety about their well-being. A lot of kids connect online instead of in person. They may not live in a neighborhood with friends of theirs. It's just very different. So the unlearning isn't about saying that our childhood was right and theirs was wrong, or vice versa, that theirs is right and ours was wrong. It's about seeing that it's different. And so acknowledging that fact. And instead of comparing, you are allowing yourself to evolve and be in this space and time, instead of thinking they should be doing things the way you did them. Another part of unlearning is allowing your kids to teach you about their generation. Instead of telling them about their generation and what they're doing and how they should be, you are allowing them to give you information about who they are and their peers and how they experience this generation. I have found, even as a therapist and somebody who's working with kids all the time, my greatest insights come from my own kids, because I'm able to really sit and listen to their experience and know that sometimes the language I'm using can be offensive, even if that's not my intention. It's maybe language I've used my whole life, when clinical language, just regular everyday language. But then my kids tell me why that might not be a good idea and how it could shift the way I talk about sexuality or gender. They also explain to me how they are feeling and their own concerns that are different than maybe mine were when I was a kid. And, really, to be honest, I don't know if I really remember what I felt like when I was a kid. I think I do, or I think I remember it, but possibly I have some amnesia about that time. And I can, instead of implying my own best guess, I can just listen to what my kids tell me about how they feel and what it feels like to live in this space and time. I can also allow them to teach me about what it is that's meaningful to them. How do they, tell me about your music, tell me about your video games, teach me, make me a playlist, like invite me into this world so I can, not so I can judge it and critique it, but so I can have a better understanding of how you are, how you engage with the world and what pop culture and media means to you. That's a relearning thing. I can also offer them my own perspective about things that I loved, movies I loved, music I love, things that made me feel good. I can share of myself, but their decision, whether or not they appreciate that or they want to pick those things up, that's up to them. I get to share, but it doesn't mean that they are necessarily going to agree, especially at this space and time. This is kind of the misunderstanding that we get, is especially on Zen Parenting Radio, is we talk a lot about listening to our kids and allowing them to share and allowing them to share of themselves. And a lot of times parents misperceive that as being permissive or allowing them to control, or believing that then if I give my kids that space to share, then I'm going to lose control. And there's absolutely nothing true about that. Just because we allow our kids to share doesn't mean that they're absolutely going to get whatever they're sharing. Real small example is when my daughter was, I think my oldest was 11 or 12, she felt like she was ready to go to a rated R movie. And she was telling me all about it, why she wanted to go, who she was going with. And I told her that I appreciated what she was sharing. I understand why she wanted to see it. And eventually she'd be able to see it. So there's a big yes, but also not quite yet. That we're going to hold off on this one until next year, or let's see if maybe when it comes on Netflix or somewhere else, maybe we can watch it together. But I did hear her out. I just didn't necessarily say yes at that moment. So you can still have boundaries, structure. There's still consequences for behavior if you have certain rules, but allowing our kids to speak and share with us is how we evolve together as a family. Okay. So first thing that, just reiterating, unlearning and relearning is a big part of parenting that we maybe didn't know. The next one is very similar to what I opened with. It's learning how to navigate discomfort. Okay. So discomfort is inherent in, no matter if you're a parent or not. There's experiences that we're going to have in life that are shocking or disappointing or painful. And as a parent, we have to be able to manage that discomfort rather than numb out that discomfort or avoid it or react to it in a way where we blame others, or especially blame our children, or react to them in a negative way. Discomfort is, by the nature of the word, it's not great. I don't think there's, anybody who chooses discomfort. But I think going back to, understanding what true confidence is as a parent is knowing you can manage discomfort, that sometimes you have to wait to find out what's going to happen. You have to, ask for help when you are struggling. You have to sit in not knowing what comes next. And again, we push that away, or we say things like, this shouldn't be happening. But I always say to my clients, why not? Why do you believe that this thing that's occurring shouldn't be happening? Because it is. And what our energy best goes to is, how do we deal with this moment? And then what could potentially come from it? For example, if we have a child who is struggling and then we find out they have a diagnosis that we didn't expect, maybe an ADHD, or we find out they may be on the spectrum, or they may need special support with a learning disability. Initially, there may be a challenge in, this wasn't supposed to happen, or how did this happen? Or how did I not see this? We blame ourselves, it becomes kind of a self-shaming thing, or what could I have done differently? And the truth is, there's a lot of possibility in that diagnosis too. There is the ability now for your child to have what they need, or the information they need to thrive. And there's also now you having a better understanding of this child and how they tick and what is helpful to them. I think when we avoid these kind of things, where we don't ask for help, or we believe we can do it all ourselves, that's when we continue to run into the same obstacles. And it's not always about a diagnosis. It doesn't have to be just about that, but maybe it's our kid has a different temperament than we do. And we need to find ways to monitor our own tone or expectation to talk to this kid in a way where they feel heard and that we feel heard. We all sometimes need, again, relearning or unlearning and relearning. Parenting is not about, now I'm in charge and I know what to do and you don't. It's not a hierarchy. It's we as parents are learning the whole time too. We are learning how to build a relationship with the people in our family. And if we have more than one child, we have to build different relationships, because our kids are not all the same. We can't apply the same information or expectation to each kid, because every kid has a different, personality. They have different strengths. They have different weaknesses. And we certainly shouldn't be comparing them to each other. And then another thing that can be harmful is labeling them. Smart one, my athlete, my helper, because then we're also boxing them in to being one thing that makes sense to us. Versus, yes, you are an athlete, and yes, you are good at academics, but you also have the possibility to be a creative, and the possibility to be a photographer, or have other experiences. You keep that window open so they can continue to expand, and you continue to expand with them. So again, I kind of went on this tangent from learning to navigate discomfort. I think the one thing that I know for sure is that no matter what age our kids are, there will be times that feel really unsettling, because dreams were dashed, or arguments have occurred, or disconnections are happening. And instead of spending all of our time believing that it shouldn't be happening, or that I shouldn't be feeling uncomfortable, that discomfort is an opportunity to then reach out or try something different, or recognize that maybe you've reached your end of what you feel and to ask for help, to do something different. Even maybe if it's not a significant crisis, read a book, attend a seminar like this, where we're just trying to expand how we view these people we love so much in our home. The next thing that is most important when it comes to parenting, especially in this day and age, is our ability to communicate. But the thing I'm going to put front and center when it comes to communication is listening. When I teach my college students about communication, they often get really excited. Like, I'm going to talk to them about how to speak, more clearly about something, or how to elaborate on their thoughts, or how to use research in their presentations. And really, my whole lesson about communication is about their ability to listen, because it's a skill that I think isn't as valued as it should be. I mean, all of it, if I said, is listening good, everyone would say yes, but there's a difference between what we know is important and then what we practice. And a lot of times what we know to be good is, yes, I need to be a good listener. But when we're in a conversation with someone, we're actually just waiting for them to stop talking so we can say something. We're waiting for that opportunity for us to be heard. So we're really not listening. We're just figuring out how we can get in there. And that happens a lot in partnership, in marriage. And that happens a lot with our kids. We feel as if we already have the answers and we already know what to say to our kids. And we're allowing them, okay, okay, son or daughter, go ahead and share your point. And we sit there and nod, but really we're just waiting for our opportunity to tell them why they don't understand and we do. And one thing that can really shift a dynamic with your kid is the ability to really listen differently. If you can sit with them and really ask them, where are you right now? And how do you feel? Or tell me what happened, especially if they had a struggle, they were sent home from school, or they're failing a class, or they had a, breakup, or their best friend and it is not talking to them anymore, or vice versa. They're not talking to their best friend. To really sit down and just say, tell me about it, not ask specific details, but just tell me about it, like how you're doing and what happened. Even if it's something that makes you uncomfortable, like they got sent home from school, that can be a pretty crisis, a moment of, gosh, why are you in trouble? And allowing them to share while listening intently and not knowing what you're going to say next. For any of you who have done improv before, and I haven't, by the way, but I just, I like to watch movies about it and I, read about it. The thing about improv that I understand to be true is that when the person up on the stage or the person that you're improvising with is speaking, you don't know what you're going to say next. You are going to go off of what they said and then take it from there. You are going to do, everybody knows the yes and like you just take it to the next place. And I think we need to practice some of those improv skills when we're listening to our kids. Because again, too often we think we already know. We think we've already got our consequence in mind. We've already told, we've already are going to tell them how they're not doing it right, how we're offended, how whatever, and we're not even listening to their perspective. And giving them that opportunity to speak not only may clear some things up for you where you had misconceptions, but it also is a connective tissue. It also demonstrates to them that what they have to say matters to you. And a big part of parenting, this is pretty obvious, but I'll say it, is feeling connected. Your kids connected to you, you connected to your kids. So these little things, it's not about big things like I'm going to take my kid on vacation and then they'll feel connected, or I'm going to buy my kid, a new phone and then they'll feel connected. Those things are not connective. Connection is what we're doing every moment with our kids. And we can't maybe be hyper-focused on every single moment, but there are times when we can really slow down and be with our kids in a way where they get the opportunity to share of themselves and we are willing, again, to learn instead of think that we know. Okay. The next thing, as far as looking at our parenting a little bit differently, is learning how to stay present. Remember, I said at the beginning about why do I call Zen Parenting, the book and the podcast? It's because everything changes, everything's connected, and pay attention. And pay attention is the same as stay present. And that's the same as what mindfulness is. I think whenever I say I'm going to do a presentation on mindfulness, I think people get lost in all the pieces of it. Is, do I meditate? And what do I wear when I'm mindful? And what are the words I say? And what's the jargon? And while those things can be interesting and can be learning experiences, mindfulness just really means to pay attention. It just really means to be here in this moment. Mindfulness or paying attention is the ability to not be focused on what happened yesterday or be worried about what's going to happen tomorrow or in 10 years. It's about being with our kids in this moment right now. So, for example, I worked with parents, especially when I was a mom who had younger kids, who would be they'd be very concerned if their 2-year-old or 3-year-old maybe hit a kid on the arm to get a toy. So they'd hear at preschool that their kid, kind of like bopped someone and took their toy. And of course, the preschool is going to call and say, this happened, and we need to talk about this. It's a learning opportunity. But the parent I was working with would always be so focused on the fact that, oh no, my kid's going to be a bully. Oh no, they're a bully, and they're going to be that kid in class who's hitting people and yelling at people. But all that happened that day was their 2.5-year-old learned that if I kind of bop this kid, I get the toy. That's all that happened. It was a learning experience. And then what they learned after that was, actually, that's not going to work in this classroom. That's not safe. So we're going to find other ways to make sure you get this toy. All of it for a 2.5-year-old is an awesome learning experience, but it doesn't have a bunch of information about it. There's no information about what that kid's going to be like at 18 necessarily. There is a moment in time that we can focus on. And the more that we are capable of focusing on that moment in time, the less anxious we will be. Because again, anxiety all comes from being focused on past and future. That's where, I don't want to simplify anxiety because there's a lot to it, and everybody has anxious experiences or an anxiety if they happen to have a diagnosis. There's many different reasons. It's not a monolith. There's many, components to it. But I will say that one of the pieces is the focus on what did happen and what could happen instead of what's happening right now. There's a being able to stay in today with your 5-year-old or your 12-year-old or your 17-year-old and trusting this moment with them without thinking what it could become. And, those of you who are listening, I know that that's very hard because we have been trained to focus on goals. And as in education, we're focusing on the next year and the next class and the next opportunity and the next program and everything in education and in the workplace, the next job, the promotion. We're always looking ahead. We have been neurobiologically trained, like our brains have been hardwired to always look ahead. So when it comes to parenting, that just seems like the logical thing to do. I'm going to look ahead to what's next. But that's one of the big shifts. That's one of the big differences in working with human beings versus being in like a workplace or a school is that, and again, I know school is with human beings, but the goals are different. It's about getting them to help them with reading and math and science. In parenting and in the home, it's about helping people understand who they are, why they're valuable, how to deal with discomfort, how to overcome difficulty. It's not about the next thing. It's about now. How do we deal with this now? It's about learning how to practice self-compassion and, looking at what our fears are in the moment rather than numbing things out and pushing them aside. And as I said before about Zen parenting, it's mostly about us as parents, how we role model it, how we show up, not just telling our children how to show up and lecturing to them, but how are we showing up? How do we role model dealing with discomfort? How do we role model our own failures? Do we talk about them or do we hide them? Do we not even try anything? Like one thing that I hear a lot from teenagers is how parents tell them to go out and try new things and do things and try out for this team and talk to your teacher about this and speak up for a kid who maybe is getting bullied and all these things. But they're like, my parent would never do that. And I'm asking you as parents, like, do you feel like you're doing those things on a daily basis? Like asking for things and trying out for new things and, taking a new class and speaking up when people are getting bullied. Like these are big asks. And I think that our ability to see them as big asks rather than expectations that our kid needs to be fulfilling so we feel good about who they are. There's a bit of a difference. Now, if we are showing up in that way and we're sharing, yeah, I tried this thing out and it didn't work out, then we understand what our kids are going through better. We understand their experiences. We have more compassion for their challenges because we're having them too. So again, I always go on these tangents, but bringing it back to paying attention, our ability to be in touch with our kids right now where they are is very important. And not just for them, but for us. I have a senior this year in high school, and I know that when my oldest daughter, she's already in college, and I remember her whole senior year, everything, I was like, this is the last. I burdened her senior year with, and there was COVID was going on too. So there was high anxiety at the time, but I really burdened everything with this like grief about everything was the last. And what I learned from that was, it was a learning experience, in that when my second daughter is a senior, I just want to enjoy her experiences and be there for it. Because me deciding that it's the last doesn't make it better or worse. It's just, I want to just be present for where she is. So, because then I know I was there. I have a memory of it. I remember it being a good, positive moment rather than a burdened, heavy, grief-filled moment, because the grief will come, there's no way to get around that. When our kids graduate and leave, there is a period of grief, and I still have those moments, especially my older daughter's a sophomore now. But I still miss her, but I'm also very happy for her. And I feel like the moments that she was at home, I did the best I could, not perfectly, but to be connected and to be present for where she was. So now that she's gone, and we still get to see her, they still come home. It's just different, and allowing it to be that way instead of it should have been different before, or I can't believe they left. Like, that's why we raise them, so they can go out and have their own life. So, another thing, or possibly the last thing, since I'm looking at the time, that can be very, very helpful to our kids, as us as parents, what we can offer is to normalize for them their experiences. I think when our kids come to us and they tell us that they're struggling with something, or that they need help, or we're finding that they are avoiding us, or they are in their room a lot, they're not coming down for dinner anymore, or they look different, or we're just recognizing these signs of, concern. We're feeling concerned by what we see. Our ability to talk to our kids about, instead of being hyper sensitive or sympathetic or worried or pitying, to be more foundational, more stable about, if you are feeling depressed, we can talk about that. I just want you to know. And if you have experience with it, you've felt depressed before, to be able to share, I don't know exactly what you're feeling, but I have experienced depression myself, and I'm always available to talk to, or I can help you find someone to talk to. Same with anxiety, being able, it's not that we want to dump on our children our problems, or that we want to somehow have them help us, but being able to share that we have felt anxiety, we have felt depression, even if we don't know exactly what they're experiencing, because again, we want to let them tell us their story, we can at least share of ourselves in that we are available to listen, and that what they're feeling, they're not alone. There's a normalization, especially in this generation. This generation has a lot of mental health awareness. They're more open about talking about it. They're, especially with their peers, they are being exposed to more conversations about it. TikTok, YouTube, all the social networking platforms. It's very language is available to them, they tend to know who they are internally, maybe more than our generation did, and maybe more than we do now. Or at least they're given their best go at figuring out who they are. They're trying to read and talk, and they have, even if, your child doesn't feel like they're struggling with mental health, they probably have a friend or a peer who is. I can almost guarantee it. And our ability to talk to them about how to be a supportive friend without feeling overwhelmed by the people around them, maybe their boyfriend or girlfriend or their best friend, how to be supportive without feeling like they're in charge of their friends. We've had a lot of those conversations in our house because sometimes our kids believe they're the only ones who can save their friends. And so they don't ask for help because they're worried about what the parents or authority figures will say. They're worried they'll get in trouble, or that they'll be judged, or that the parents will, jump into some kind of action that isn't helpful. So our ability to be open to these conversations, and again, temper our anxiety around them, and also normalize that our kids are not alone. Because it's interesting, they can read about it and see TikToks about it, but they still can feel alone in their skin. They may look out in the world and say, yeah, I know it's there, but I still feel alone. The way that we feel less alone is our ability to connect with people we love and care about. So the virtual reality can do a little bit in bringing some awareness, but it's really the connection with other people or the ones we love that make the big change. So our ability to have those conversations or to be open to them, that's also how our children feel connected to us. If we are willing to do that uncomfortable thing and ask the question. And I'll say this, because a lot of parents tell me that their kids maybe don't speak with them anymore about things, or they're much more shut down. I really recommend being creative. I text my kids a lot. I send them memes. I've left Post-it notes on their door. I have, suggested that we watch certain shows together that I know will elicit a certain conversation. I've asked them to show me shows that they're watching or a song. And then I've asked them, why do you like those lyrics? What does that mean to you? And we don't always have to come at some conversation in a really direct way. We can just have a mission, an internal mission of, I want to be able to communicate with my kid, and I'm going to try a bunch of different ways to do that. A story that I share quite frequently is that when my oldest child was young, she was able to share with me that when she told me things that were difficult, that I looked very disappointed. My face changed, and she said I looked disappointed. And, as a parent, your initial thought is, no, I don't, or come on, or let my face be what it is, or, you want to be defensive. But I believed her. I'm like, I don't know what my face is doing, but whatever you're experiencing, I believe you. So our way of having conversation then turned into writing to each other. I got a notebook, and I told her if she's ever struggling with something, to write in the notebook and leave it on my bed. And she did that. There's a lot of difficult things she was able to share with me over the years, that we had the conversation through writing. We eventually were able to transfer it to speaking to each other, but it was the first step in, opening something up that she was worried about talking about. It's why a lot of parents say that they like having conversations in the car, because a lot of times you're not looking straight at each other. Maybe one person's in the back seat, or if you're in the front seat, you're both looking forward. It's not so intense. And I think we need to be able to invite their not their beliefs, but their input on what a safe conversation feels like to them. It might be initially through text or through Post-it or through writing or in a car, and to, instead of tell them that we want it another way, to listen to them. Our job as parents, yes, we are the leaders, we're in charge, but part of being a leader is being able to listen to how everybody, what their needs are. It's not about telling everybody what they're going to do. That's not what great leaders do. Great leaders help people become fully who they are, and then, help them thrive. And that's what we're hoping to do with our kids, of course. So again, if there's any questions, please feel free to write them, because I know we only have about 5 minutes, but I'll finish up if I don't hear anything here. The core of my book, Zen Parenting, is really broken out into chapters that I focused on the chakra system. And the chakra system, for people that haven't heard of it, it's just the energy centers in our body. And if you have been in yoga or have done any kind of Ayurvedic or any kind of like acupuncture, you've probably heard of chakras. But it doesn't matter, there's some people who are like, I'm not really interested, or I don't believe in that. That's fine. It's the goal of Zen parenting is not to get you to believe in something, to understand chakras really. I'm just using it to focus on the different parts of ourselves. And I found it to be a really good way to break out who we are, and why we need to break out all these parts of ourselves is because we are very layered, and there's reasons why we do what we do. There's reasons why we react the way we react. It's based on our history, our upbringing, our traumas, our expectations, our culture, our religion. And we really need to look through all of those aspects. And because of time, again, chakra 1 is about our right to be, our sense of stability, our foundation, our grounding. Chakra 2 is about the right to feel, about our emotions and our experiences, our creativity. Chakra 3 is about the right to act. That's our gut instinct. That's our sense of self. That's our personality. That's why we're here. Chakra 4 is our heart center. It's our right to love and be loved. And that's our ability to not only love, but also feel grief and to feel hurt and go through the challenges that we've had. Chakra 5 is our right to speak and, express who we are. A lot of us, especially women, I find, because I work with women, they have a hard time speaking who they are because all these things, their sense of self, their creativity, their foundation, it's uncertain. And so they have a harder time speaking about what they believe to be true. So sometimes we have to figure out these other things first before we can express who we are or do them simultaneously. And then the right to see, it's the third eye center. That's about our intuitive sense, our sense of, what energy, what we know to be true, what feels right, our dreams, our imagination. And then the last chakra is our right to know, which is our connection to everything. It's our interconnectivity. For some, it's God. For some, it's other people. For some, it's energy. For some, it's scientific. It doesn't matter what you call it, but it's our connection to other people. And so the reason I broke the book out this way was because parents have to do this work first. And when I say work, I mean have to have these awarenesses first, so they can then allow their children to have these awarenesses about themselves. Or we do it simultaneously. You don't have to do one or the other. It's not binary. You just, as we are discovering ourselves and evolving as parents, we are then allowing our children to evolve. And if we don't evolve as parents, if we don't look at our history, if we don't think about ourselves and why we do what we do, then we can be very demanding and judgmental of what our kids are doing, because we're not investigating our own experiences. So we don't care about theirs. We just want them to do what we say to do. So there's this whole as I said earlier, this whole unlearning, this whole process of developing a different way of experiencing ourselves and our parenting. And what's nice, and I'll leave you with this, is it doesn't just apply to parenting. This evolving and this understanding of ourselves, and even unlearning and navigating discomfort and learning how to listen and staying present and normalizing, this applies to every aspect of our lives. So we are most ready and willing to use it in parenting, but we can also use it in our marriage, in our partnership, in our workplace, in, friendships. There's nothing about it that is just for parenting. We get to utilize it in being in better relationship and in better connection with everybody we love. And it feels good to role model those things. And again, imperfectly role model, because we get to show everybody how we make mistakes too, and how we're willing to accept that and learn and roll with that. So I've been talking for a very long time.
And I could listen to you more and more. I have, let's see, today, 4 pages of notes from your talk here. I really, so many things you said that struck me. We always talk about the role modeling. And when you were talking about encouraging our child to get out there, I always think about how sometimes a parent with the best of intentions will say, you need to get out there and do some volunteer work. Well, are you doing some volunteer work? And I love the way you said imperfectly role model.
Absolutely.
But the challenge, it seems to me there's this push pull that happens. And I know you work a lot with mothers.
Yes.
It seems so instinctive. You want to protect your children.
Yeah.
And yet, again, with the best of intentions, how do we find that balance between those failures are, as you said, learning experiences? How can I reconcile that wanting need?
Yeah, and I feel like that, and I'm personally, like when you ask that question, I feel that in my body, because that's the hardest thing. When the kids are little, it's so easy when they run into the street to pull them out. That's how I keep you safe. Don't run into the street. Let's not do that. You need to wear a helmet when you're riding your bike. Like, we have all these things in line to keep our kids safe. And as they get older, as parents, our goal, the job of a parent is to continually let our kids go. And I mean that with the best intention, with complete love, because that is what they need to do. Is they need to become, adults who can make decisions on their own. And the only way they learn to make decisions on their own is by making decisions on their own. It's the most uncomfortable process. So, but what I always, the answer I always give, Gilda, is that if our kids know, if we have open communication and they're not afraid of us, and they know that they have a support system to rely on, 2 things happen. Number 1, they often come to us before anything gets too serious. And number 2, if something does, get serious, we can trust that we have shared with them everything we can. Like there is like when my kids are doing something new, what I know for sure is if they're really struggling with something, they will call. Now, maybe not call about the smallest thing, but they have at least demonstrated to me that they know when they call, I'm going to help, I'm going to support, I'm going to follow through. And it's not going to then end with a lot of judgment and disconnection and shame and guilt. Because if that's the way we end a difficult situation with our kids, they may not come to us again.
Right.
And I know that doesn't answer every question. Like, how do we teach our kids to drive and then ride in the car with them? I don't know. I'm still figuring that out. I struggle so much, the fact that my kids drive around in cars, but that's what adults do. Like, we have to flow. Again, it's this learning to manage the discomfort of their growth.
Yeah. It all comes together. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. You talked a lot about the relationship, and every single speaker, and it's particularly, as you said, after COVID. I think it was our friend Lisa Demore who said that we can talk to our kids about the prom, we can talk to our kids about what it was like to exam time, but living through COVID is something we haven't been there. So now more than ever, everything that you said. I mean, you and I have talked before COVID, but now it's like, I want to underline everything that you said, and that connection that is just so key. So leave us with one important thought, that what I love what you said about the creative way to connect. Tell me why this is so important now that I have this relationship with my child.
Because the world is changing and we have no idea what's coming. And I don't mean that in a scary way. I just mean that I think we used to think we knew what this is what came next and then this, and we are all in a new kind of world that changes very rapidly. And our ability to do this together and be willing to be open-minded, and our ability to trust what our kids tell us, and our ability to, because really we're talking to more parents here, to keep our minds and hearts open to what we don't know. What that allows is our kids to, my first point was learning from our kids, allow them to teach us. Let's do this together. This whole hierarchy of parents know everything and kids know nothing. It's so outdated. It never was true, but it's an old hierarchy that we really need. What we are doing is we're raising human beings, regardless of the age they are. And the more that we can empower them with trusting themselves, with asking for help, with knowing that failure is normal, all these pieces, and showing up that way ourselves, this is going to be a lifelong relationships. And again, the skill that, as I do, two of my children are adults now. And the reason that I have relationships with them now is because of what I did before. And I'm not saying it's impossible to create it later if there were struggles. What I'm saying is, why not look at them as separate human beings that we learn from, that we have, we treat each other with dignity. And then as they become adults, that relationship we build as adults is more simple.
Yeah, beautiful. That partnership. I love that. And I'll be here for you and we'll figure it out together.
Absolutely.
My last question, what keeps you positive now in this unpredictable, challenging time?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, people. I mean, the thing is when I look out into the world, I see everything everybody else does. I know there are challenges. I know there is pain, and I've experienced it myself, a lot of fear. But then when I'm with people are amazing, and they're resilient and they're beautiful. And when I work with families, I have yet to work with a family who doesn't love their family and their children immensely. They just sometimes don't know how to show it. So that's the reframe, and the relearning is not about you need to learn how to love. It's about how can people feel your love. That's the difference. So I love people. I love them.
Beautiful. Figure out how we can show them. I love that. Love chatting with you always. And everybody who's listening, make a phone call and tell someone to come back and be enlightened and inspired with Cathy Adams again at 7 p.m. tonight. So thank you
I'm looking forward to it.
much.
Thanks, Hilda.
See you
soon.
Really gonna hug the kids.
Yeah,
Take
go
care.
hug them.